Good afternoon and welcome to this PowerPoint presentation or webinar where we're going to just go through some of the basics of O1 visas and visa options for those in the film and TV industry. Um, we will get straight along. Obviously, there's a lot to cover. We're just going to go for the half an hour, and after that, if anyone has any questions, we can hopefully bring some of them through, or you can shoot an email through to me or give me a call, and we can take it from there. Right, moving straight along, the O visa is probably the main visa that tends to work in these situations. The O visa is for those of extraordinary ability. The O1 is basically separated into two or perhaps three different kind of sections. O1A is the one that's available for pretty much everyone. This is for those in science, education, business, or athletics. O1B is a slightly lower standard than O1A, and it's available. There's one O1B version for those in the arts, and there's also one for those in the motion picture and TV industry. So obviously arts can be artists, musicians, graphic design, art directors, creative directors, all of that. Motion picture TV, again, like I mentioned, it's a lower standard. We're looking at extraordinary achievement, and this side of things is more open to actors, writers, directors, producers, this kind of thing. In addition, there's also the O2 visa, which can work in certain situations. This is for essential support personnel. If you have a group of people, for example, a production coming out, one of them is O1 eligible, is strong enough for the O1, we can sometimes attach a lot of the other people who kind of would be part of the production as O2 visas, as long as we can show they're going to be essential support personnel. The O3 visas, these are the dependent visas. So if you've got an O1, your dependents can have an O3 visa that allows them to come in, allows them to study, but no work authorization on that side of things. So the O1B visa standards. O1B for arts, what this means, the standard here is distinction. This is demonstrated by a high level of achievement in the field of arts, evidenced by a degree of skill and recognition substantially above that ordinarily encountered. In this case, the foreign national must be recognized as being prominent in your field, so renowned, leading, or well-known. For O1B film and TV, this one we're looking at, does the foreign national have a record of extraordinary achievement? We're looking for a very high level of accomplishment, significantly above that which is ordinarily encountered. This is where we're looking more for outstanding, notable, leading, this kind of thing. The O1B arts motion picture TV criteria, as we mentioned, is lower standard than the O1A. O1A is still available for pretty much everyone. It's kind of a catch-all category. It includes business people, science, education, like we said, pretty much everything else. O1B, in this situation, the standard is we need to meet certain criteria. Now, the first criteria that we tend to go with is if you have some kind of major award. So if you have won an Oscar, you're pretty much good. We can kind of show that you've got a one-time award, you've done really well, great, we show evidence of that, should be approved, shouldn't be an issue. These are major international awards. Or we're looking for three of the following. This is for people that do not have the Oscar and, really kind of trying to show additional evidence to show that they meet this standard. In this regard, one of the first criteria that we look at is showing that you've performed and will perform services as a lead or starring participant in distinguished productions or events. Now, these are kind of, in this situation, at least for actors, we tend to look at their credits. Has this person been in really big movies? The production or the event could be the movie, could be the TV show, that side of things. We're trying to show that they've been a lead or starring participant in this production. The production itself needs to be distinguished. So if it's a short film, if it's an independent film, it may not have had very wide release. It might not kind of fall into that category of being a distinguished reputation. The second criteria we look at is showing they've achieved national or international recognition for achievements. shown by published material. So this would be where we're really looking to see if this person has received press and this kind of thing. Let me just go back here. The third criteria, and this one we can normally combine with that first criteria. This is showing that you performed and will perform in a lead, starring, or critical role for organizations and establishments that have distinguished reputation. So for an actor, this often works out where we're able to show that, okay, this actor was, a star in this particular movie or this particular TV show. When we're looking at the organizations and establishments, we're looking at the production company, for example, behind that production. So if it's a major production for a major production company, we should be able to make the argument that you've been lead, starring, or critical role for the organization that's kind of overseeing that production. This can also work for actors, for example, who have been a part of commercials, whereas the production itself may not necessarily be massively distinguished. The company that you were doing that commercial for, maybe. So we could maybe get a letter from someone proving this side of things. Moving on to the other criteria, a record of major commercial or critically acclaimed success. This is where we're looking at Billboard charts, box office results, album sales, this kind of thing. If you've been a part of a movie that did really well, this is going to be one of those kind of things where we're looking at like Box Office Mojo or something along those lines to get the evidence to show that you have a record of really, commercial critically acclaimed successes. 5 is receive significant recognition for achievements from other recognized experts. This is a good one because a lot of you will know of experts in the field or other people who are willing to sign off on reference letters that talk about you. The idea in this situation is immigration wants to see that these letters are written by people who are experts within the field. You need to make sure that this letter makes sense why we're actually listening to this person, why this person is giving us an opinion on you, and then we have them kind of basically sign off on a letter that says this person is really great, has done really well. And in this case, with the reference letters, it's often a good idea to get a good selection of letters. You want to maybe get some letters from a couple of people from within the US, from outside the US, people that have worked directly with you, some people who know of you more by reputation as opposed to anything else. So that side of things can really help. The high salary criteria is the next one, and this is a really tough one, just because immigration can be, they're very, very tough on this particular criteria. If you have at some point in your career, you've earned a pretty high salary for, a couple of hours work on a particular commercial or something like that, then this can be something that we can kind of shoot for. But especially right now, immigration has been very tough on this. We always need to be clear on what you will actually be doing and what the field is, because the O1 is job specific and employer specific. So the job specific side of things means if you've got credits as an actor, and that's where you're kind of where the majority of your credits lie, then if we're filing an O1 for you, we want to be doing it as an actor. Because if you try and do it as a producer, it's unlikely to work. Immigration can come back and say, well, you don't show that you've got extraordinary ability or extraordinary achievement as a producer, you show that you've got it as an actor, so this doesn't work. So that's definitely one thing to make sure you're clear on. We can do kind of hybrids in certain situations. Proper documentation of these criteria is key. We need to be able to evidence all of this. We can't just say that these things have done really well in the past. We need to be able to show that there's actual evidence of these things. And this can sometimes come from the reference letters, the expert opinion letters. If we can get, for example, an expert opinion letter from the director of a major movie that shows that you were critical to this particular film or the production company or something along those lines, that can help. Now, in this case, we're really trying to meet as many of these criteria as possible. We only really need to hit at least 3 of them. So that's kind of one thing just to bear in mind, that technically you only need to meet 3, but obviously most of the time we're going to go for as many of them as we can. Classifying for our national, this is kind of what we were talking about. In which field will you be performing? So again, it's a case of, depending on what your position's going to be here, what do you have projects doing? That's kind of what we're looking at, showing that you've got the ability in that section. However, there is sometimes a way of narrowing the field. For example, if we can get you down to, a commercial producer versus a producer, opera singer versus musician, by narrowing the field, we kind of we're able to push you up in the estimation. So because there's less people in that field, so it's harder for immigration to come back and say, you don't qualify because we're comparing you to every actor that's ever existed. Whereas if we're comparing you just to a certain kind of subset of actors or singers, it's easier for us to show that you're at the top of your particular field there. In new media is a big thing now with bloggers, YouTube, gamers, this kind of thing. And it's kind of one of those areas where we're really just still trying to educate immigration on the fact that, for example, hits or views on a YouTube video do actually count for something. Subscribers, followers, all of this kind of thing. But this is an area, again, where immigration, when they wrote the regulations, it was quite a long time ago. These things didn't necessarily exist. So it's a case of educating the officer that this is equivalent to, for example, commercial success or something along those lines. O1 Arts or Motion Picture TV, which standard are we going to look at? It really depends on what you're going to be doing in the US. Are you going to be working, obviously, in the motion picture TV industry, or is it more of an arts side of things? If we're going to be in the motion picture TV industry, we do need to get advisory opinion letters. Otherwise, immigration will likely RFU you, which is where they send out a request for additional evidence. This is where they're asking for a letter from some kind of labor union or management organization. Give you a couple of examples. If you're an actor, we would need to get an advisory opinion letter from SAG-AFTRA and from AMPTP. If you're a director, it's DGA and AMPTP and this kind of thing. So this is something that if you're going to be working in motion picture TV, you need to factor in that you're going to need to get these advisory opinions, which generally adds somewhere between $250 per opinion onto your filing fees and everything else. And in some situations can also take a while. I know with SAG, recently they've been taking 2 or 3 weeks to get a response. So if you want that advisory opinion before you file, you need to factor that in, as it's going to take a little bit longer. The petitioner requirement. So with an O1, I mentioned that it's employer specific. You do need to have a petitioner. You can't just sponsor yourself on the O1. It's not for self-petitioning. Now your petitioner can either be, these are the main ones that we see, some kind of US employer, so maybe a US production company, for example, who's going to hire you for a particular feature film, for a particular TV series, or for any movies that they have. Or it can be a US agent, where they're basically going to give you a contract which goes through the terms of the representation. Ideally, we would want to then get a list, like kind of an itinerary of events to show what you're going to be doing down the line. The employer's petitioner, this is, kind of shown here where, for example, a restaurant sponsors you as a chef or something along these kind of lines. The employer as petitioner is good because we can show that this particular employer wants to hire you for 3 years. You've got a contract. You're basically going to be working full-time for this employer. The problem with this side of things is that you can only work for that specific employer. Whereas if you go through, you have your petitioner be an agent or a manager, this can give you a lot more flexibility because you can do other things. The problem with this side of things is that you do need to have these deal memos or potentially an itinerary of projects for as much of the next 3 years as possible. An O1, they're able to give you an O1 for 3-year period. But generally speaking, you need to be able to show you've got projects lined up for that entire time. Otherwise, if you only have one project that's going to last 6 months, there's a good chance immigration will only give you a 6-month visa. So this I kind of go into here about the O1 can be approved for up to 3 years, but it's only approved for the duration. We want to be able to include contracts, deal memos that go through this information. Now, this is important. Gaps between events are okay as long as you can string together various events. So let's say you have that one project for the next 6 months, then you have another project next year sometime for another 6 months. If we put all of these together, generally speaking, immigration is going to give you kind of the full period of time. They're not going to give you a 6-month one and say, come back for the next project and we'll do that, as long as we can show with reasonable certainty that these projects are going ahead. If it's very kind of vague, the project may or may not happen, then immigration can give you issues. But if we can show that these are legitimate projects and these are going to happen and they're confirmed, then that side of things tends to be okay. The consultation requirement, gone through all of this. I don't think there's anything else I wanted to go through on this section. One thing to note is PGA actually, I think, normally charge $500 for their advisory opinion. So if you're a producer, you might be out of luck. But if you're a member of the PGA, you can normally get those for free. Basic filing procedure. The way it works is obviously we get a petitioner. We get evidence of your credits in the field. We need to show at least 3 of those criteria that we went through earlier. We want a deal memo or contract showing that you've got projects. The consultation letter, the advisory opinion, we're going to need to get sorted. And if a petitioner is the agent manager, we need a contract between you and that agent, and also ideally get an itinerary of events. The documents required for filing, these are the forms, the I-129, the I-129OP supplement, and then normally we add into that the support letter, which really goes through exactly how you qualify for the O1, going through the different criteria, showing all the evidence, this kind of thing. A consultation letter. Peer advisory opinions can sometimes work as well. In this regard, peer advisory is generally where we just get, in certain fields where a labor union doesn't exist, we can use a peer, someone who's kind of considered to be an expert in that field, to sign off on a letter saying, I work in this field, I know that maybe a labor union doesn't work, but I've reviewed this person's credentials and they're good. The question that comes up a lot is filing with CSC or VSC. CSC is the California Service Center, VSC is the Vermont Service Center. Is one better than the other? I don't really see much of a difference right now. But at the end of the day, the place where you have to file is based on where you're going to be working or where the petitioner is. So you don't have a huge amount of choice either way. But this is kind of one of those things where a lot of people get superstitious if, they've heard of someone who got denied through the CSC but approved through VSC. There's good and bad offices at both places. Similarly, in normal versus premium processing, I think right now regular processing is probably taking you around 2 or 3 months, depending on the case. Premium processing, you pay an additional $1,225 to the government, and they process your case in 15 calendar days. Jurisdiction is based on location of employment. If you're working in multiple locations, it's based on the location of the petitioner. This is what I went through before. Couple of tips. It's always good to save anything that has your name on it. When it comes to these kind of cases, you just want to really build them up and get as much documentation and evidence as possible so that when you file, you've got everything right there. This is kind of one of those weird situations that we see where people have been very busy building their career. They've turned down opportunities for interviews and for press and this kind of thing. If you are thinking about getting an O1 or potentially moving on to a green card down the line, this is something you want to try and make sure you get. When we file an extension, technically immigration will generally issue 1-year extensions if you're still doing the same activities or events or same employer. But they can give you 3-year extensions in certain situations if we can show that there's a new event, new employer, or something along those kind of lines. But it's something to be aware of, that you may only get an extension of 1 year and have to continue to extend that way. If you're in the arts and you're filing within 2 years of your last advisory, and it's the same position, same employer, this kind of thing, you can normally use the old advisory opinion. In motion picture TV, they often want you to get new ones. Other things, technically, once you've been approved for your O1 petition, when you go to the consul, they really shouldn't be completely re-adjudicating your visa petition. Now, this is where you've got your O1 petition approved, you go to the embassy abroad to get your visa, your actual O1 visa stamp added into your passport. Technically, they really shouldn't be completely re-adjudicating the case unless they feel there's some kind of fraud or misrepresentation at work. But in certain situations, you can run into some issues at that point if you get a nasty officer or something along those kind of lines. Really, generally speaking, the embassy is more kind of interested in, are you admissible? So do you have any immigration issues, any criminal issues, or anything like that? The O2 visa, this we touched on briefly earlier. This one can often work for essential support personnel for the O1 artist. The O1 must remain in place at all times. So if the O1 changes or leaves, you can only transfer your O2 to another O1, otherwise your O2 ends too. This one in film and TV, we've got to show a pre-existing long-standing working relationship or show that you're in the middle of production. This is the continuity thing where you've got production filming that's taking place outside the US, continued production will take place in the United States, and you show that the foreign national is essential to the completion of the production. P visas, these don't necessarily apply to many people in the acting realm, but they can do in very certain situations, such as P1B if you're a member of an internationally recognized entertainment group, if you're coming to the US to perform as a member of an entertainment musical group that has been recognized internationally as outstanding for a sustained and substantial period of time. In these cases, you need to be able to show that at least 75% of the members of your group have had a substantial and sustained relationship with the group for at least 1 year. These are the criteria for the P1B, very similar you will see to kind of the O1 side of things. What other visa options exist for those in this particular area? If you're an amateur entertainer, you can technically come in on a B2. This is where you're an amateur in an entertainment athletic activity, not a member of any of the professions associated with that activity, but you can't be paid except for maybe incidental expenses such as prize money or something like that. This is more for performing in social charitable events, this kind of thing. E2 is possible. I've seen this a lot with producers. You come in, you're going to set up your own production company and kind of move forward with that. This can work, but the E2 has its own requirements. Generally with an E2, you need to be from an E2 treaty country. You need to be able to show you've invested a substantial amount in setting up this company. You want to have a good business plan. You want to be able to show this company isn't going to be marginal. You show that the company isn't going to be marginal by showing that this company is down the line going to potentially hire US workers and this kind of thing. E3, H1Bs, these can work. These are generally, E3 is only for Australians, H1B for pretty much everyone else, but these can work in certain situations that we won't really go into but on this one, but we have got other webinars coming up that focus more on the H1B side of things. I-visas can also work for journalists and bloggers if you're a member of the foreign media coming into the US to work, but you need to have the home office abroad. EB1, this is kind of moving forward a little bit. EB1 is once you've got your O1, maybe you've had a couple of O1s, and you now want to try and shoot for a green card. Now for the EB11, extraordinary is basically defined as a level of expertise indicating that you've reached one of the small percentage who have risen to the very top of the field of endeavor. Now, with EB11, this is a lot higher standard. With EB11, it's kind of a one-size-fits-all. They don't have a situation where they have a lower standard for those in the arts or anything else like that. So even though you may have got an O1, it doesn't necessarily mean you're going to qualify for the EB1. The good thing about EB1 is you can self-petition, or you can have an employer sponsor you. Have to be able to show this sustained national or international acclaim. Evidence in this situation, again, similar to the O1, but a little bit different. If you've got one-time achievement, if you've got, for example, an Oscar, you're good on that side of things. Otherwise, you need to show 3 out of 10 criteria. These are the types of criteria that work for EB1. Again, lesser national or international prizes or awards, membership in associations requiring outstanding achievements. Generally speaking, in this case, if you've paid just a membership, if all you have to do is pay a membership fee to become a member, it's probably not going to work. If instead you're a member of the Academy or BAFTA, for example, where generally speaking you have to be nominated to be a member, this can work. Published materials, if you have press and that kind of thing, this is, again, something that they look at for the EB1. If you've ever had the opportunity to judge the work of others, this is a great criteria on EB1, particularly because it's just actually one of those ones that they tend to be a little bit easier on, a little bit nicer on these ones. So this is something, going back to the associations, if for example, you were a member of the Academy and you're a voting member, you kind of may be able to hit 2 criteria there. You may be able to show, yep, I've got the membership and I've been judging the work of others by being a voting member. Original contribution of major significance, this is a tougher one to show. This is where you're really showing that you have somehow created this original contribution that's had major significance to your field. Other things don't necessarily apply in this area as authorship of articles, but display of your work at artistic exhibitions or showcases can work. This is a criteria where if your work has been shown at film festivals and this kind of thing, this one can definitely be something that you can shoot for. We have our old friend here, the critical leading role for distinguished organizations. In the EB1 criteria, they do not have critical or leading role for distinguished productions, but you can sometimes bring it in. High salary again applies, and commercial success again is something that they look at. But as I mentioned, these are all criteria that are a little bit tougher. You need more evidence in order to be able to show that you meet this standard. Comparable evidence, this generally speaking is where you can bring in other evidence that you think may show that you have extraordinary ability, but you have to find one of these criteria that you don't think applies to your particular field. And with that, I think we are done. If anyone has any other questions or wants to see if you're eligible for either an O1 or kind of moving forward for a green card, feel free to shoot me an email or give me a call. Thanks so much for joining us today, and check out some of our other webinars coming up I think the next one is tomorrow. Speak to you soon. Thanks a lot. Bye.